They say you never truly understand betrayal until it happens in your own home. I thought I knew Edgar, my husband of 14 years. He wasn't extraordinary by most standards, but he was mine. Steady, dependable, the father of our beautiful daughter. Or so I believed, until the day I discovered what lies beneath the surface of familiarity. There's a fine line between contentment and complacency, and I was about to learn just how devastating it can be when the person you trust most crosses it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started with a notification, a simple alert from our bank that would unravel the tapestry of our life together. I remember that morning with painful clarity. The autumn sunlight streaming through our kitchen window, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, and me, Suzanne Miller, staring at my phone in disbelief. The college fund we had carefully built for our daughter Delia over 8 years, nearly $45,000, had been emptied. Not gradually, not partially, but completely, in one single transaction. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a technical glitch, an error that would be quickly corrected with a simple phone call. Edgar had always handled our finances. It was our arrangement. I managed our home and Delia's activities, while he managed the money. A traditional setup that had seemed sensible for two busy professionals. I with my interior design business, he with his accounting practice. Now, that division of labor felt like a carefully laid trap. I called Edgar immediately, of course. The call went straight to voicemail, his professional voice instructing me to leave a message. I sent texts that showed as delivered but remained unanswered. With each passing hour, dread pooled in my stomach, a cold, heavy feeling that something was terribly wrong. By evening, when Delia had gone to bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, I finally found the note. Not prominently displayed as one might expect for such a life-altering communication, but tucked into his sock drawer, a place he knew I rarely looked. 3 paragraphs, written in his precise handwriting, that demolished 14 years of marriage. Suzanne, I can't do this anymore. I've been unhappy for years, suffocating in a life that never felt like my choice. I've met someone who makes me feel alive again. Connie understands me in ways you never tried to. I've taken my share of our assets. The college fund will be replenished eventually, but I need this money now to start over. Don't try to find me. It's better this way. Edgar. My share of our assets? The college fund was never our assets. It was Delia's future. And how could his share possibly be the entire amount? I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, clutching the note, trying to make sense of words that refused to align with the man I thought I'd married. In that moment, shock protected me from the full impact of his betrayal. My mind fragmented the situation into manageable pieces. He's gone. The money's gone. There's someone named Connie. And tomorrow I would have to explain to our 8-year-old why her father wasn't coming home. The house felt cavernous that night, filled with echoes of a family that no longer existed. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching Edgar's possessions, the books he'd left behind, the coffee mug still sitting on his desk, the framed photo of us from a vacation 3 summers ago. Looking closer at our smiling faces, I searched for signs of his unhappiness, some clue I had missed. Had he already met her then? Was he already planning his escape while posing with his arm around me, the Mediterranean glittering behind us? I didn't sleep. Instead, I did what many betrayed spouses do. I became a detective in my own life. I searched his desk, his closet, his browser history on our shared computer. The evidence assembled itself with devastating efficiency. Emails, 2 apartment complexes in another city, searches for uncontested divorce, a hidden credit card statement showing jewelry purchases and hotel charges. The narrative was as cliché as it was painful, The middle-aged man having an affair with someone from his office, the secret meetings, the calculated deception. Connie Marshall. I found her easily enough, her social media presence offering glimpses of a woman about 10 years younger than me, with the polished look of someone who prioritizes appearance. An administrative assistant at a firm where Edgar had consulted. There were no photos of them together yet, but her recent posts hinted at new beginnings and taking chances on love. The timestamps matched perfectly with the withdrawal from Delia's account. By dawn, anger had replaced shock. Not the hot, explosive anger that drives people to dramatic gestures, but something colder and more focused. Edgar hadn't just left me, that I might have eventually understood. People fall out. Of love. Marriages end. But he had stolen from our daughter, jeopardizing her future for his midlife renaissance. That was unforgivable. As the first light of morning filtered through the blinds, I heard small footsteps padding down the hallway. Delia appeared in the doorway, her dark hair mussed from sleep, her eyes still heavy with dreams. "Mommy? Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, climbing onto the bed beside me. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind all night, trying to find the right words. Words that would explain her father's absence without crushing her spirit. Children at 8 are remarkably perceptive. They can sense lies, even well-intentioned ones. But they're also concrete thinkers, unable to fully grasp the complexities of adult relationships. "Sweetie," I began, pulling her close. "I need to tell you something important. Daddy has decided to go away for a while. He's going to be living somewhere else." Her body stiffened against mine. "Because of me? Is it because I didn't clean my room when he asked?" "No, absolutely not," I said firmly, tilting her chin up to meet my eyes. "This has nothing to do with you. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense even to other adults. But I need you to know that your daddy's choice to leave is about him, not about you. Is he coming back?" Her voice was small, fragile. The question stabbed at my heart. "I don't think so, honey. Not to live with us. But I'm sure he'll want to see you." Even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. A man who could empty his child's college fund might be capable of far more significant abandonments. Did he take all our money? "I heard you on the phone with the bank." I hesitated. How much should an 8-year-old know about financial betrayal? "Daddy took some money that was supposed to be for your college fund," I admitted, choosing honesty but moderating the details. "That wasn't right of him, and I'm going to fix it." Delia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. When she finally spoke, her words caught me completely off guard. "We don't need him, Mommy," she said, her voice suddenly steady, her eyes meeting mine with surprising clarity. "I can help you. I'm good at math, and I can make a new plan for college. Mrs. Bennett says I'm the best problem solver in my class." In that moment, looking at my daughter's determined little face, I felt something shift inside me. The cold anger melted, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. Edgar had underestimated both of us, my resilience and Delia's spirit. Whatever came next, we would face it together. "Yes, you are the best problem solver," I agreed, kissing the top of her head. "And we're going to be okay." I didn't know yet if it was true, but looking into my daughter's trusting eyes, I made a silent vow to make it true, whatever it took. Before the college fund vanished, before Edgar's betrayal turned our lives upside down, we were what most people would call a normal family. Not perfect. No family is, but stable, comfortable in our routines, secure in the life we'd built together. Our mornings followed a predictable choreography. Edgar would wake first, shower, and start the coffee while I got Delia ready for school. He'd scan the news on his tablet while I packed lunches and checked homework folders. We'd kiss goodbye at the door, quick, perfunctory kisses that had long ago lost their spark but maintained the appearance of affection. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't question the cooling of passion. After 14 years, I thought it was natural, comfortable, safe. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb known for its good schools and community feel. The kind of neighborhood where people still brought casseroles when someone was sick and children played in front yards until dusk. Our house wasn't the largest or the most impressive, but I'd poured my heart into making it a home, using my interior design skills to create spaces that felt both beautiful and lived in. Edgar had seemed proud of it once, showing it off to colleagues and clients who came for dinner parties. In retrospect, I wonder if he'd begun to see it as a cage rather than a sanctuary. My design business, Harmony Interiors, had grown steadily over the years. I'd started small after Delia was born, taking on local clients who wanted help refreshing a living room or choosing paint colors. By the time Delia started school, I was working with developers staging model homes and designing spaces for upscale boutiques. I loved the work, the creative challenge, the satisfaction of transformation, the grateful clients. Edgar had supported my career, at least outwardly. My wife, the artist, he'd say at social gatherings, his hand at the small of my back. She can look at an empty room and see possibilities no one else can. Edgar's accounting practice was similarly successful. He specialized in small business accounting, helping local entrepreneurs navigate tax codes and financial planning. His clients trusted him implicitly. He had a reputation for being meticulous, ethical, conservative with investments. The irony of this isn't lost on me now. Delia is our miracle. After 3 miscarriages, her birth felt like a gift I never thought I'd receive. From the beginning, she was curious and determined, hitting milestones early and asking questions that sometimes left us scrambling for answers. By 8, she was reading at a 6th grade level, creating complex stories illustrated with her surprisingly skilled drawings and developing an interest in mathematics that both baffled and delighted me. "She gets that from me," Edgar would say proudly when she'd bring home perfect math tests or show him the code she was learning in her after-school STEM program. We'd established the college fund the week after she was born. "Our daughter is going to have every opportunity," Edgar had insisted, setting up the automatic transfers from our joint account. Every birthday and Christmas, grandparents and godparents would contribute. It wasn't just money. It was a promise, a commitment to her future that we all took seriously. Our weekends had their own rhythm. Saturday mornings at Delia's soccer games where Edgar would cheer enthusiastically from the sidelines. Afternoons spent on home projects or at the local park. Evenings with takeout and family movies. Sundays were quieter. Edgar would often work for a few hours while Delia and I baked cookies or worked on craft projects. We'd have dinner together every night, talking about our days, making plans for upcoming holidays or vacations. It all seems so ordinary in retrospect, so unremarkable. But that's the insidious nature of betrayal. It hides in plain sight, in the mundane spaces between morning coffees and goodnight kisses. While I was planning our summer vacation and helping Delia with her science fair project, Edgar was planning his escape. While I was picking up his dry cleaning and remembering his mother's birthday, he was emptying our daughter's future into his own pocket. There were signs, of course. There always are. Edgar started working later, his explanation about tax season extending well beyond April. His phone became a guarded possession, angled away from my view, password changed monthly. He grew distracted during family time, physically present but mentally elsewhere. Our intimate life, already sparse, became non-existent, with excuses of stress and fatigue that I accepted without pushing. But the signs are always clearer in hindsight. At the time, I attributed his distance to a midlife malaise, perhaps, or the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I was busy with my own work, with Delia's activities, with maintaining our home and social connections. We were growing. Apart, yes, but I believed we were still growing in the same garden. Our roots intertwined below the surface, even as our blooms faced different directions. I remember the last normal day vividly. It was a Tuesday in October, the air just beginning to carry the crisp promise of autumn. Edgar had seemed almost nostalgic at breakfast, watching Delia and me with an intensity that should have alarmed me, but instead felt like a reconnection. "You two are quite the pair," he'd said, smiling as Delia and I debated the merits of her wearing a sweater to school. "It's going to be cold later," I insisted. "But it's not cold now," she countered, logical as always. Edgar had laughed, kissed us both on the forehead, and left for work with a lingering look I now recognize as goodbye. That evening, he'd suggested we order from our favorite Italian restaurant, splurging on the good wine and even Delia's favorite tiramisu. He'd helped her with her math homework, the two of them huddled over the kitchen table, their dark heads bent together in concentration. Later, he'd sat next to me on the couch, closer than usual, his arm around my shoulders as we watched a mindless sitcom. "Are you okay?" I'd asked, puzzled by his sudden affection. "Just appreciating what I have," he'd replied, and I'd felt a surge of warmth, interpreting his words as a recommitment rather than a final inventory. The next day, he was gone, and so was the money that represented our daughter's future. Looking back, I wonder if that last day was a form of penance, a small gesture of atonement for what he already knew he was about to do. Or perhaps it was simply a moment of doubt, a brief consideration of what he was leaving behind before desire or desperation pushed him forward into his new life with Connie. Whatever his reasons, that day stands as the final frame of our before picture, the last moment when Delia and I existed in the world we thought we understood, before betrayal redefined everything we thought we knew. Looking back, I can see now that Edgar's betrayal wasn't a sudden rupture but a slow fracture, developing hairline cracks that I either missed or willfully ignored. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs along a trail that led to his eventual departure, if only I had been paying closer attention. 6 months before he left, Edgar began changing his passwords. Not just on his phone, which he suddenly kept face down on tables, but on our shared accounts, banking, insurance, investment portfolios. When I asked him about it, his explanation seemed reasonable enough. "There's been a lot of security breaches lately," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "One of my clients got hacked last month. Better safe than sorry." I accepted this without question. Edgar was the financial expert after all. And wasn't that the foundation of our partnership? Trust in each other's areas of expertise. I designed beautiful spaces. He managed beautiful spreadsheets. A division of labor that had served us well for years, until it didn't. Then came the business trips. Edgar had always traveled occasionally for conferences or to meet with clients, but suddenly, these trips became more frequent. Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, cities where he claimed to be meeting with potential business partners or attending accounting seminars. "The practice is growing," he explained, packing his suitcase with meticulous care. "We need to expand our network if we want to stay competitive." Again, I believed him. I even felt proud of his ambition, his determination to build something substantial. I didn't question the new cologne I found in his toiletry bag, or the credit. Card statements that arrived in a separate envelope marked business expenses, confidential. Our conversations began to shift as well. Edgar, once engaged and interested in the details of my day, became distant, responding with vague murmurs when I shared stories about difficult clients or Delia's latest achievements. "That's nice," he would say, his attention fixed on his phone or laptop. When I asked what he was working on, his answers became increasingly technical, filled with accounting jargon I didn't understand, a convenient barrier to further questioning. The physical distance grew alongside the emotional one. Edgar started sleeping on his side of the bed, no longer reaching for me in the night. When I initiated intimacy, he had a litany of excuses: headaches, early meetings, stress about accounts. Eventually, I stopped trying, telling myself it was just a phase, that all marriages go through periods of disconnection. "Dad's always tired," Delia observed one evening after Edgar begged off from her request to play a board game. "Is he sick?" "He's just busy with work, sweetie," I replied, ignoring the knot forming in my stomach. Children notice everything, their observations unfiltered by the convenient denials adults construct to maintain the status quo. Perhaps most telling were the changes in his spending habits. Edgar had always been conservative with money, meticulous about budgeting and saving. He tracked our expenses in detailed spreadsheets, questioned large purchases, and insisted on reviewing even my business expenses. Then suddenly, he became uncharacteristically loose with money. New clothes, a sleek smartwatch, expensive lunches charged to his personal card rather than his business account. When I commented on a particularly costly dinner, he became defensive. "I work hard," he snapped. "Am I not allowed to enjoy the fruits of my labor once in a while?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't about the money itself, but the sudden shift in attitude, the underlying resentment in his tone. As if I were a warden rather than a partner, monitoring his movements, restricting his freedom. "Of course you are," I said carefully. "I was just surprised." His expression softened then, replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. "I'm sorry, Suze. It's just stress. This new client is demanding, and I'm feeling the pressure." I accepted the apology, relieved to avoid conflict, to maintain the peaceful surface of our lives. That was my mistake, confusing the absence of conflict with the presence of honesty. The dinner party stopped too. Edgar had always enjoyed hosting colleagues and friends, playing the role of genial provider, showing off our perfectly designed home and my culinary skills. But about a year before he left, he began declining my suggestions to entertain. "Let's keep it just us for a while," he'd say. "I see these people all day at work. I don't need them in my home too." His reluctance extended to neighborhood gatherings and school functions. He'd find excuses to miss Delia's parent-teacher conferences, the block party, friends' anniversary celebrations. Our social circle began to shrink, and with it, the external. Eyes that might have noticed the growing distance between us. There were financial warning signs too, though I didn't recognize them at the time. Small irregularities in our accounts, transfers I didn't remember authorizing, withdrawals that Edgar attributed to business expenses or quarterly tax payments. Nothing large enough to raise serious alarm, but a pattern nonetheless. Once I found a statement for a credit card I didn't know existed. When I questioned Edgar about it, he became uncharacteristically angry. "Do you not trust me to handle our finances anymore?" he demanded. "Would you like to take over the spreadsheets, the tax preparations, the investment decisions?" "No, of course not," I backpedaled immediately. "I was just curious." "It's a business card," he explained, his voice softening but still tight. "I keep it separate to make tax filing easier." Perhaps the most significant warning came from my friend Lou, the only person who voiced concerns directly. We had met for coffee about 3 months before Edgar left, and after catching up on kids and work, she leaned forward with a serious expression. "Is everything okay with you and Edgar?" she asked. "Dennis saw him having lunch downtown with a woman last week. He said they seemed close." My heart had stuttered momentarily, but I quickly regained composure. "Probably a client," I said dismissively. "He meets with female business owners all the time." Lou nodded, clearly unconvinced, but unwilling to push. "Of course, you'd tell me if anything was wrong, right?" "Absolutely," I assured her, while internally dismissing her concern as unnecessary worry, perhaps even jealousy of my stable marriage compared to her recent divorce. When I casually mentioned the conversation to Edgar that evening, his reaction should have been my final warning. His face flushed, then paled. His hands gripped his fork and knife with unnecessary force. "Lou should mind her own business," he said, voice dangerously quiet. "And Dennis should be careful about spreading gossip. It could be considered defamation." "I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it," I said, surprised by the intensity of his response. Edgar's expression shifted then, a calculated return to normalcy that I now recognize as the mask of a practiced liar. "Of course not. But it's unprofessional to speculate about who I meet with for business." He smiled tightly. "Maybe we should take a break from Lou and Dennis for a while." And just like that, another set of eyes was removed from our lives. Another, potential witness to his growing deception sidelined. I agreed because it seemed easier than arguing, because I trusted my husband more than my friend's concerns, because I couldn't conceive of the alternative, that the man across the dinner table was systematically dismantling our life together. While I watched and said nothing, all these moments, these small betrayals and evasions, were laying the groundwork for the final act. Like a foundation being silently eroded beneath a seemingly solid house, everything appeared stable until the moment it collapsed entirely. The day my world collapsed started ordinarily enough. It was a Wednesday morning, and I was reviewing fabric, samples for a client's sunroom while waiting for my first cup of coffee to cool. My phone chimed with a notification, and I glanced at it absently, expecting a text from a colleague or perhaps my mother. Instead, I saw the blue and white logo of our bank, with a message that made my heart stutter. "Alert. Withdrawal of $44,875.32 from account ending in 4721. I blinked, certain I had misread. That particular account, the one ending in 4721, was Delia's college fund, an untouchable nest egg we had been building since her birth. The only withdrawals ever made were the automatic transfers to her 529 plan twice a year. With trembling fingers, I opened our banking app, entered my password, and navigated to the account. The balance, which had been steadily growing for 8 years, now showed a mere $124.68. The transaction history revealed a single withdrawal, processed at 9:17 a.m. the previous day, while I had been in a client meeting and Delia at school. My first thought was fraud. Someone had hacked our account. I immediately called the bank's fraud department, clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white as I waded through the automated menu and hold music. "I need to report an unauthorized withdrawal," I said when a representative finally answered, my voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in my chest. The representative asked for my account details, identity verification, and the transaction in question. There was a long pause as she reviewed the information. "Mrs. Miller, this withdrawal was authorized using the correct account credentials and security questions," she explained carefully. "It was processed in person at our downtown branch by your husband, Edgar Miller. He provided proper identification, and the joint account agreement you both signed gives him full access to this account." "That's impossible," I insisted, even as a cold realization began settling over me. "That money is for our daughter's education. He wouldn't—" "I understand your concern," the representative interrupted, her tone professionally sympathetic. "But according to our records, Mr. Miller is an authorized user on this account with full withdrawal privileges. If there's a dispute about the use of these funds, I'm afraid that's a personal matter we cannot intervene in." After a few more useless minutes of conversation, I hung up. The coffee I had been sipping now tasted like ash. I tried calling Edgar, once, twice, 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail, his professionally detached voice instructing me to leave a message. "Edgar, the bank just notified me about a withdrawal from Delia's college account. Call me immediately. This has to be a mistake." But even as I spoke the words, a terrible certainty was forming. This was no mistake. The timing, the amount, the sudden inaccessibility. It was deliberate. Edgar had taken our daughter's future and disappeared. I spent the next hour in a frenzy of attempts to locate him. I called his office only to be told by his assistant that he had taken a personal leave of absence for 2 weeks, effective yesterday. I texted mutual friends, none of whom had heard from him. I even drove to his office hoping to find some explanation, only to be met with uncomfortable glances from his colleagues and an empty desk with family photos already removed. By afternoon, desperation drove me home again, where I began a systematic search of our house. I found evidence of his planned departure in the half-empty closet, the missing suitcase, the absence of his passport from our safe. But it was the credit card statements hidden in his desk drawer that delivered the final blow. Charges for jewelry. I had never received hotel rooms in cities where he had claimed to be at conferences, airline tickets purchased weeks ago, and then there was the name that appeared repeatedly on his call logs when I checked our phone bill online. Connie Marshall. 20, 30 calls a day, texts at all hours, the digital footprints of an affair, conducted right under my nose. I found her on social media easily enough. She worked at the same downtown financial complex as Edgar, though for a different firm. 10 years younger than me, with the polished look of someone who spends a considerable amount on personal maintenance. Her profile showed a woman who enjoyed posting motivational quotes about taking chances and living your best life, interspersed with filtered selfies and photos of expensive restaurant meals. The most recent post, dated just that morning, sent a wave of nausea through me. A close-up image of her hand with a sparkling diamond ring captioned, "New beginnings. Sometimes life surprises you with second chances at happiness. Blessed, and your new chapter." The comments below included congratulations and excited questions about wedding dates. One comment from someone named Brooke asked, "So fast. When do we get to meet the lucky guy?" To which Connie had replied, "Soon. He's just finalizing some things from his past life." His past life. That's what we were to Edgar now. Delia and I, our home, our 14 years together. Just a past life to be finalized and forgotten. It was while staring at this digital evidence of Edgar's new future that I finally found the note in his sock drawer. 3 paragraphs of justification and dismissal, as if our life together could be summarized and discarded in a few hastily written sentences. He hadn't even had the courage to leave it where I would find it immediately. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, holding the piece of paper with its familiar handwriting, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not gentle drops, but racking sobs that bent me double with their force. I cried for the betrayal, for the years wasted, for the future that had been stolen. Not just from me, but from our daughter, Delia. The thought of her brought me upright again, tears still flowing but mind suddenly clear. She would be home from her after-school program in less than an hour. I would have to tell her something. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father has chosen money and another woman over her future? I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, pale, eyes reddened, hair disheveled. But there was something else there too, something hardening beneath the surface. Anger, yes, but also determination. Edgar had taken our money, but he wouldn't take anything else. Not my dignity, not my strength, and certainly not my ability to protect our daughter. I heard the front door open and Delia's voice call out, "Mom, I'm home." Her footsteps echoed, down the hallway coming closer. "In here, sweetie," I called back, my voice remarkably steady. She appeared in the doorway, backpack still on, a drawing clutched in her hand. "I made this in art class today. Mrs. Bennett said it shows good perspective." She held up a crayon drawing of our family, 3 stick figures in front of a house, the sun shining overhead, the past captured in waxy colors on construction paper, a reality that no longer existed. It's beautiful, I said, taking it from her. Delia, come sit with me for a minute. I need to tell you something important. She studied my face, her expression changing from excitement to concern. Even at 8, she could read the signs of distress, could sense when something fundamental had shifted. Is it about Dad? She asked quietly, climbing onto the bed beside me. Is that why he didn't say goodbye this morning? The simplicity of her question broke something open inside me. Not goodbye this morning, but goodbye forever. How would I ever make her understand? Yes, sweetheart, I said, pulling her close. It's about Dad, and about us. Things are going to be different now, but I promise you, we're going to be okay. I didn't know yet if that promise was one I could keep. But looking at my daughter's trusting face, I knew I would do whatever it took to make it true. The days following Edgar's departure unfolded in a blur of practical crises and emotional aftershocks. Each hour seemed to bring a new revelation, another layer of his deception exposed, like rings on a diseased tree. The morning after discovering the empty college fund, I woke to find our joint checking account similarly depleted. He had left just enough to cover the upcoming mortgage payment, a calculated move that felt less like consideration and more like another twist of the knife. See, I'm not completely heartless. I left you the house. But a house requires more than a mortgage payment. There are utilities, insurance, maintenance, property taxes, all the invisible costs of home ownership that Edgar had always handled. As I sat at the kitchen table that morning, surrounded by bills and account statements, the true scope of my financial ignorance became painfully clear. Mom, there's no more cereal, Delia announced, standing in front of the open pantry. I looked up from the paperwork, momentarily disoriented. How could I be worrying about cereal at a time like this? We'll get some after school, I promised, forcing a smile. How about toast for today? She nodded, seemingly satisfied with the alternative. But I caught her glancing at the papers spread across the table, her expression too solemn for an 8-year-old. Is it bad? She asked, climbing onto the chair beside me. I hesitated, torn between protecting her and respecting her intelligence. It's complicated, I finally said. Dad took most of our money when he left. Even my college fund? Her directness startled me. I had told her about the fund periodically, how it was growing, how it would help her attend any university she chose someday. I hadn't realized how much those casual comments had registered. Yes, even that, I admitted. But I'm going to fix it, Delia. I promise. She considered this for a moment, her small face surprisingly composed. We could sell stuff, she suggested. Like when we had the garage sale last year, we made $300. The simplicity of her solution brought a lump to my throat. $300 wouldn't begin to address the financial chasm Edgar had left us, but her immediate impulse to help, to solve problems rather than surrender to them, filled me with a fierce pride. That's a great idea for later, I said, smoothing her hair. Right now, let's focus on getting you ready for school. After dropping Delia off, I drove straight to my bank. The personal banker's expression shifted from professional warmth to careful neutrality as I explained my situation. I need to understand exactly what accounts we had, what access my husband still has, and how I can protect what's left, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Kenneth, the banker, typed quietly for a few moments, his frown deepening as he reviewed our accounts. Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry to say that Mr. Miller had significant access to your financial portfolio. As a joint account holder, he was legally entitled to withdraw funds from your shared accounts. Even Delia's college fund? I asked, though I already knew the answer. That account was established with both of you as trustees, he confirmed. Legally speaking, either trustee can make withdrawal decisions. What about my business account? For Harmony Interiors? Kenneth checked again, and a flicker of relief crossed his face. That appears to be solely in your name. The balance is untouched. At least Edgar had left my professional identity intact. Small mercies. By the end of the meeting, I had opened new personal accounts in my name only, transferred the remaining funds from our joint accounts, and begun the process of removing Edgar's access from everything I could. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A first step toward financial independence I should have established years ago. The next blow came that afternoon when I returned home to find a certified letter waiting. Edgar had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He was requesting an expedited process, waiving any claim to the house or physical assets in exchange for keeping previously withdrawn funds and release from future financial obligations to the minor child. Translation: he wanted to keep Delia's college fund and avoid paying child support. The letter included contact information for his lawyer, a name I recognized as one of the city's most aggressive divorce attorneys. I sat on the front steps, the paper trembling in my hands as the reality sank in. Edgar wasn't just leaving us. He was systematically eliminating every responsibility, every connection, every obligation. When I finally called my own lawyer, Vince Torres, a family friend who had handled our wills and house closing, his reaction confirmed my worst fears. "Suzanne, I'll be straight with you. What Edgar did with the college fund was morally reprehensible, but legally murky. Joint accounts, even designated for specific purposes, can be emptied by either party. So he just gets away with it?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Vince sighed. "Not necessarily. We can fight it as dissipation of marital assets, especially since he used the money to explicitly benefit himself and his new relationship. But it's going to be a battle, and honest courts often split the difference." I closed my eyes, absorbing this. "And the child support? Can he really just walk away from Delia financially?" "Absolutely not." Vince's voice hardened. "No judge is going to let him completely off the hook for child support. But if he's hired Marshall Beck, he's going to try every trick in the book to minimize his obligations." By the time I picked up Delia from school, I was operating on autopilot, my mind spinning with legal terms and financial calculations. How would I afford a legal battle? How long could I maintain our lifestyle without Edgar's income? What would happen to my business if I had to divert time and resources to this fight? Delia climbed into the car, immediately sensing my distress. "Bad day?" she asked, buckling her seatbelt. "A challenging one," I admitted, forcing a smile into the rearview mirror. "How was yours?" "Okay. Tommy Peterson said his parents got divorced last year and now he has 2 bedrooms and double Christmas presents." She delivered this information matter-of-factly, watching for my reaction. "Is that what you want? Double Christmas presents?" She shook her head, suddenly looking much older than her 8 years. "No. I just want things to be normal again." My heart constricted. "Things will be normal again, sweetie, just a different kind of normal." When we arrived home, there was a voicemail waiting from my mother. Someone had seen Edgar and some young woman having dinner at an expensive restaurant 2 towns over. News traveled fast in our social circle. By tomorrow, everyone would know. As I prepared dinner, simple pasta, one of the few meals I could manage on autopilot, Delia sat at the kitchen counter, watching me with unusual intensity. "Mom," she said finally, "are we poor now?" The question stopped me mid-stir. How do you explain sudden financial insecurity to a child who has never wanted for anything? "No, we're not poor," I said carefully. "We have some challenges right now, and we might need to be more careful about spending for a while. But we have this house, and I have my business, and we're going to be okay. Dad took our money to be with his girlfriend, didn't he?" The directness of her question startled me. "How did you— I heard you on the phone with Vince, and Alyssa at school said her cousin saw Dad kissing a lady at the mall last month. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit she'd had since toddlerhood. "I didn't tell you because I thought maybe it was a mistake. Children see everything, understand more than we give them credit for." While I had been busy, Ignoring signs and making excuses, Delia had been quietly processing her own observations, drawing her own conclusions. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," I said, sitting beside her. "Dad made some bad choices that are affecting us right now. But I need you to know that none of this is your fault, and we're going to get through it together." She nodded solemnly, then surprised me with her next question. "Can I help count the money we have left? I'm really good at math." In that moment, something shifted between us. Delia wasn't just my child to protect. She was becoming my partner in this unwanted journey, offering her strengths, seeking ways to contribute. The realization was both heartbreaking and fortifying. "Yes," I said finally. "You can help. We'll figure this out together." As we sat at the table that night, Delia carefully adding columns of numbers while I sorted bills into priority piles, I felt something unexpected alongside the fear and anger, a glimmer of fierce determination. Edgar had taken much from us, but he had underestimated what remained: our resilience, our intelligence, and most importantly, each other. One of the cruelest aspects of betrayal is how it isolates you, trapping you between shame and pride, between the desperate need for support and the fear of judgment. For 3 days after Edgar's departure, I operated in a bubble of denial and secrecy, telling only Vince and my mother what had happened. But secrets have a short shelf life in close communities, and I knew it was only a matter of time before speculation and gossip outpaced the truth. "We should tell Grandma and Grandpa," Delia said over breakfast on Saturday morning, methodically cutting her pancakes into precise squares. "And Aunt Lou, they'll want to help." My parents lived 3 hours away, retired to a lakeside community they'd dreamed of for decades. Lou wasn't actually Delia's aunt, but my closest friend, the same one who had warned me about seeing Edgar with another woman months earlier. "I don't want to worry them," I said, but even to my own ears, the excuse sounded hollow. Delia looked up from her plate, her expression disarmingly adult. "That's not true. You're embarrassed." The accuracy of her assessment stunned me. I was embarrassed, mortified, actually. Not just that Edgar had left, but that he had managed to deceive me so completely. That I had been, in the eyes of the world, a fool. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "Mrs. Bennett says that when scary things happen, sharing the burden makes it lighter." Mrs. Bennett, Delia's second-grade teacher, was apparently dispensing wisdom alongside multiplication tables these days. And she wasn't wrong. "When did you get so smart?" I asked, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I've always been smart," she replied with simple confidence. "Dad just got stupid." The unexpected assessment startled a laugh from me. The first genuine laugh since the bank notification had upended our lives. It felt strange, almost transgressive, to find humor in the rubble of our family, but also necessary. Like finding a seedling pushing through concrete. That afternoon, I made the difficult calls, first to my parents, then to Lou. Their reactions were predictably different. My mother gasped and cried. My father grew ominously silent before promising to handle this, and Lou simply said, "I'm coming over. What do you need? Wine or whiskey?" "Both," I answered, surprising myself with the honesty. My parents arrived the next day, my father's old station wagon loaded with groceries and a check that made me simultaneously grateful and uncomfortable. "It's not charity, Suzanne," my father insisted when I tried to refuse. "It's what family does. Edgar may have forgotten that, but we haven't." Lou arrived an hour later, arms full of food and a bottle of expensive whiskey. She took one look at my face and enveloped me in a hug so fierce it nearly broke me. "I should have pushed harder when I saw them together," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I wouldn't have believed you," I admitted. The truth of it painful but necessary. I wasn't ready to see it. While my mother took Delia to the park, giving the adults space to speak freely, Lou, my father, and I sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the financial documents I had been too afraid to fully analyze alone. He emptied the college account, took half your retirement fund, maxed out 2 credit cards, and left you with the mortgage, my father summarized, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Is there anything else we don't know about? I hesitated, the shame rising again. The property taxes are due next month, and I'm not sure if he paid the homeowner's insurance premium. Lou, always practical, already had a notepad out. Let's make 3 lists: immediate needs, short-term concerns, and long-term issues. Tackle them in that order. For the next 2 hours, we worked methodically through my financial situation. The picture wasn't pretty, but it wasn't as apocalyptic as my fears had painted it. My design business was profitable, and without Edgar's expensive habits draining our resources, I could manage the essential bills. The mortgage would be tight, but not impossible. You might need to take on more clients, my father suggested, or consider refinancing the house. Or sell it, Lou added gently. There's no shame in downsizing, Suze. The thought of selling our home, the space I had lovingly designed, where Delia had taken her first steps and celebrated every birthday, felt like another loss on top of too many. But I forced myself to consider it objectively. It was a 4-bedroom house, far more space than a single mother and child needed. The mortgage was substantial, and the maintenance costs were only going to increase as the property aged. I'll think about it, I promised. But not immediately. Delia needs some stability right now. By the time my mother returned with Delia, we had a plan. Not perfect, but a starting point. The immediate bills would be covered, partly with my parents' help, and partly by liquidating some non-retirement investments Edgar had overlooked. For the medium term, I would increase my client load and reduce unnecessary expenses. The long-term issues, rebuilding Delia's college fund, securing my own retirement, would have to wait. How is the park? I asked as Delia bounded in, cheeks flushed from the autumn air. Grandma let me have ice cream even though it's cold, she announced. And we saw Mrs. Peterson. She asked about Dad, and Grandma told her he ran off with a tramp. My mother had the grace to look sheepish. I may have been a bit direct, she admitted. Mom, I protested, though part of me appreciated her candor. Edgar didn't deserve the protection of polite euphemisms. Well, it's true, my mother insisted. And better Delia hears the truth from family than gossip from classmates. That evening, as the adults prepared dinner, I overheard Delia explaining the situation to my father with unexpected clarity. Dad took my college money to be with his girlfriend, she said matter-of-factly, helping him set the table. Mom says we have to be careful with money now, but we're going to be okay. That's right, Pumpkin, my father replied, his voice thick with emotion. And your grandma and I are going to help make sure of that. I know, Delia said confidently. And I'm helping too. I'm really good at math, so I can check Mom's addition. Sometimes she makes mistakes. My father chuckled. Does she now? Yep. And I don't need new clothes this year. I can wear my old ones even if they're not as cool. The voluntary sacrifice, offered so casually by an 8-year-old who shouldn't have to think about such things, nearly undid me as I stood in the kitchen doorway, unnoticed by either of them. Lou found me there, frozen between pride and heartbreak, and gently guided me back to the kitchen. That girl of yours is something special, she whispered. She shouldn't have to worry about money, I said, blinking back tears. She should be thinking about playgrounds and birthday parties, not budgets and hand-me-downs. Kids are resilient, Lou reminded me. And she's not worried, she's problem-solving. There's a difference. That night, after everyone had gone, my parents to a nearby hotel, Lou back to her apartment with promises to return tomorrow. Delia and I sat on her bed for our nightly reading ritual. But instead of opening her book, she looked at me seriously. "Why? You still sad, Mom?" "A little," I admitted. "But having Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Lou here helped a lot." She nodded, considering this. Mrs. Bennet says that when you share your problems, they get smaller, and when you share your happiness, it gets bigger. Mrs. Bennet is very wise, I said, touched by the simple profundity of the lesson. So we should tell more people, Delia concluded. Not because we need more help, but because it makes the sad smaller. In that moment, I realized that Delia wasn't just processing our new reality. She was teaching me how to navigate it. While I had been caught in a web of shame and secrecy, she had instinctively understood that isolation would only intensify our struggle. You're right, I said, pulling her close. We won't hide what happened, but we also won't let it define us. Deal? Deal, she agreed, snuggling into my side. Can we read now? I want to find out if Hermione figures out the potion. As we fell into the familiar comfort of our reading ritual, I felt something shift inside me. A subtle recalibration of perspective. Edgar's betrayal had robbed us of security, stability, and trust. But it hadn't taken everything. We still had family, friends, and each other. We had a community willing to help shoulder our burden if only I was brave enough to let them. And most importantly, we had Delia's clear-eyed wisdom, cutting through adult complications with the simple truth. Sharing makes the sad smaller. It was a lesson I needed desperately, delivered by the most unexpected teacher, my 8-year-old daughter, who was proving to be wiser than either of her parents. Just when I thought we had established a tenuous new normal, my parents back home but checking in daily, Lou stopping by with dinner twice a week, Delia settled back into her school routine. The second wave hit. Like an aftershock following, an earthquake, it rattled the fragile stability we had begun to rebuild. The first tremor came in the form of a certified letter from Edgar's attorney. The expedited divorce proceeding was moving forward, with a court date already set for next month. The letter included a detailed financial disclosure statement that made my blood run cold. According to Edgar's accounting, our marital assets were substantially less than I had believed. Properties I thought we owned jointly were listed in his name only. Investments I had contributed to were categorized as premarital assets. The business I had helped him build by entertaining clients, hosting dinners, and providing free design services for his office was valued at an absurdly low figure. I called Vince immediately, my hands shaking as I described the contents of the letter. This is classic financial gaslighting, he said, his voice tight with professional anger. He's establishing an alternate reality on paper, hoping you'll be too overwhelmed to challenge it. Can he do that? Just lie about our finances? He can try, Vince replied grimly, but we'll demand a forensic accountant as part of discovery. If he's hiding assets or misrepresenting their value, we'll find out. I can't afford a forensic accountant, I admitted, the words bitter in my mouth. I can barely afford your retainer. There was a moment of silence before Vince spoke again. Suzanne, I've known you and Edgar for over a decade. I watched you support him while he built his practice. I'm taking this case on contingency. We'll figure out payment once we see what we can recover. His kindness nearly undid me. Thank you, I managed, my voice hardly more than a whisper. Don't thank me yet, he warned. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Edgar knows the financial system inside and out. He's been planning this for months, maybe years. He'll have covered his tracks carefully. The next blow came directly from Edgar himself, the first direct communication since his departure. Not a call or even a text, but an email with the subject line, Delia's visitation. Suzanne, my attorney advises me to establish regular visitation with Delia as soon as possible. I propose picking her up this Sunday at 10 a.m. and returning her by 5 p.m. We can discuss a more permanent arrangement once the divorce is finalized. This is non-negotiable. My parental rights remain intact regardless of our marital status. Edgar. The cold, formal tone, the absence of any acknowledgement of his abandonment or the financial devastation he'd left in his wake, It was so characteristically Edgar that I actually laughed, a harsh sound that startled even me. He had emptied our bank accounts, stolen our daughter's future, and disappeared without a word, but expected to waltz back into Delia's life on his schedule. When I showed the email to Lou that evening, her reaction mirrored my own. "He can't be serious," she fumed, pacing my kitchen. "He steals your money, runs off with his girlfriend, and now wants weekend daddy time? Absolutely not. Vince says I can't legally prevent him from seeing her," I explained, the reality of it sitting like lead in my stomach. "He's still her father." "Biology doesn't make him a father," Lou spat. "Actions do, and his actions have been those of a thief, not a parent." She wasn't wrong, but family court rarely sees things in such black and white terms. Unless Edgar posed a direct threat to Delia's physical safety, which, for all his moral failings, he did not, the court would likely grant him some form of visitation. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Delia herself. I found her in her bedroom that evening, meticulously coloring a detailed mandala pattern, her small face screwed up in concentration. "Delia, sweetie, I need to talk to you about something," I began, sitting on the edge of her bed. She looked up, immediately alert to the seriousness in my tone. "Is it about Dad? Is he coming back?" "Not coming back to live with us," I clarified quickly. "But he does want to see you. He's asked about spending some time with you this Sunday." I watched her carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something harder to define. "Where would we go?" she asked finally. "I don't know," I admitted. He didn't say. Would his girlfriend be there? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't even considered that possibility, though it should have been obvious. "I don't know that either, honey, but I can ask him. I don't want to." "Meet her," Delia said firmly. "She helped him take my college money." Her assessment wasn't wrong, but I was trying to avoid demonizing Edgar for Delia's sake. Despite everything, he was still her father, and I didn't want her carrying the weight of adult resentments. "You don't have to meet anyone you're not comfortable with," I assured her. "If you don't want to go this Sunday, you don't have to. I can tell Dad you need more time." Delia considered this, her brow furrowed in thought. "No," she said finally. "I'll go. I want to ask him why he left without saying goodbye." That wasn't nice. "No, it wasn't," I agreed, struck by her simple assessment of Edgar's abandonment. The third complication arrived the next morning in the form of a call from my largest client, a luxury condo development where I had been designing the model units and common spaces. "We've decided to go in a different direction with the design," the project manager explained, his voice carefully neutral. "We'll pay out your contract through the end of the month, of course." "Can I ask why?" I managed, though I already suspected the answer. There was an uncomfortable pause. "Suzanne, you know I think your work is exceptional, but the developers are concerned about consistency and availability, given your personal situation." My personal situation. Such a polite euphemism for your husband left you financially devastated, and we're worried you might have a breakdown in the middle of our multi-million-dollar project. "I see," I said, fighting to keep my voice professional. "I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with the developers directly. My personal circumstances have no bearing on my ability to complete this project on time and to specification. I'll pass along your request," he promised, though we both knew it was unlikely to change the outcome. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring at my design plans for the condo project. The loss of this contract would cut my projected income for the year by nearly 40%. Combined with the legal fees for the divorce and the daily expenses of maintaining our home, this financial hit threatened to topple the precarious balance we had established. When I picked up Delia from school that afternoon, she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Did something bad happen again?" she asked, buckling her seatbelt. I considered deflecting, offering some vague reassurance, but remembered her wisdom about sharing burdens. "Yes," I admitted. I lost a big client today. It means less work for me, which is challenging right now. Because we need money, she stated matter-of-factly. Yes, because we need money. She was quiet for a moment, processing this new setback. Can you get new clients? I'll try, I said, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. The design industry relied heavily on word of mouth and reputation. If clients were hesitant because of my personal situation, finding new work quickly would be an uphill battle. What? About your friend who owns the furniture store? Delia suggested. The one with the pretty lamps? Couldn't you do designs for her? She was referring to Brooke Sullivan, a local boutique owner who sold high-end furniture and home accessories. We weren't close friends, but we had collaborated occasionally when clients needed specialty pieces. That's actually a good idea, I said, surprised by the practical suggestion. I'll give her a call tomorrow. See? Problems can be fixed, Delia said with the simple confidence of a child who still believed in solutions, despite recent evidence to the contrary. That evening, after Delia was asleep, I sat in the dim light of my home office, surrounded by the accumulating complications of our new reality. Edgar's financial deceptions, his sudden interest in visitation, the lost client, the mounting legal expenses, each problem seemed to multiply, spawning new challenges before I could address the original crisis. For the first time since Edgar's departure, I allowed myself to fully feel the weight of what we were facing. Not just the practical difficulties, though those were substantial, but the deeper injuries, the betrayal of trust, the shattering of our family, the theft of security and certainty. I cried then, not the shocked tears of the initial discovery, or the angry tears of the days that followed, but deeper, grief-laden sobs that came from a place of genuine reckoning. This was our reality now. No amount of planning or positive thinking would restore what had been lost. We were irrevocably changed, our family, our future, our understanding of the world. And yet, as the tears subsided and I sat in the quiet aftermath of that honest grief, I found myself remembering Delia's simple confidence. Problems can be fixed. Not easily, perhaps, not completely, but they could be addressed, one by one, with determination and creativity and the help of those who cared about us. Edgar had underestimated me once, assuming I would collapse under the weight of his betrayal. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of being right. Tomorrow, I would call Brooke about potential collaboration. I would respond to Edgar's visitation request with firm boundaries. I would continue working with Vince to untangle the financial web Edgar had woven. And most importantly, I would remember what Delia already seemed to know instinctively, that, while we couldn't control what had happened to us, we could control how we responded to it. Sunday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Edgar would be picking up Delia in less than an hour for their first visit since his departure. I had responded to his email with clear parameters. No overnight visits yet, no introducing Connie without prior discussion, and a detailed itinerary of their planned activities. His terse reply had agreed to these terms with obvious irritation. Delia sat at the kitchen table, meticulously arranging and rearranging the contents of her small backpack. A book, a sketch pad, her favorite colored pencils, and the stuffed rabbit that had been her constant companion since infancy. You don't have to take all that, I said gently. Dad will probably have activities planned. I like to be prepared, she replied, not looking up from her task. The words were so adult, so measured, that they broke my heart a little. 8-year-olds shouldn't need to armor themselves with preparation for a day with their father. When the doorbell rang precisely at 10 a.m., we both startled. Edgar's punctuality had once been a point of pride for him. Now it felt like another weapon in his arsenal of control. I'll get it, Delia said, sliding from her chair. Wait, I called, reaching for her hand. Remember what we talked about. If you feel uncomfortable at any time, you can call me and I'll come get you. No questions asked. She nodded solemnly. I know, Mom. I'll be okay. I followed her to the door, bracing myself for the first face-to-face encounter with Edgar since discovering his betrayal. When the door swung open, I was struck by how unchanged he appeared. The same trim build, the same precisely combed hair, the same expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. Only his eyes were different, avoiding mine, focusing instead on Delia. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice softening in a way it never did for me anymore. "Ready for our day?" Delia nodded, stepping forward to receive his awkward half-hug. "I brought my sketch pad," she said, "in case we go somewhere interesting." "Good thinking," he replied, still not meeting my gaze. "We'll have a great time." "She needs to be home by 5, I reminded him, my voice steadier than I expected. "And she has her cell phone if she needs anything." "I'm aware of the arrangements, Suzanne," he said, finally looking at me with cool detachment. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of my daughter for a few hours." I bit back the obvious retort that a man who steals his child's college fund has questionable caretaking credentials. Now wasn't the time, not in front of Delia. "Have fun, sweetie," I said instead, bending to kiss the top of her head. "I'll see you this afternoon." As they walked to Edgar's car, a new luxury model I'd never seen before, presumably purchased with some of our money, I noticed how small Delia looked beside him, her backpack nearly as wide as her shoulders. I fought the urge to call her back, to protect her from the inevitable disappointment this day might bring. After they drove away, the house felt eerily quiet. I tried to focus on work, reviewing design plans for a small project that had come in through a previous client. But my mind kept wandering to Delia. What was Edgar saying to her? How was he explaining his absence, his choices? Would he try to turn her against me? By noon, I was pacing the kitchen, checking my phone every few minutes. No calls, no texts. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. The sound of the doorbell startled me from my anxious spiral. Through the peephole, I saw Brooke Sullivan, the boutique owner Delia had suggested I contact, standing on my porch with what appeared to be a large portfolio case. I opened the door, confusion momentarily displacing worry. "Brooke, what are you doing here?" "Intervention," she said simply, stepping past me into the foyer. "Lou called me, said you lost the Parker development contract and needed a distraction while Delia's with Edgar." She set down the portfolio case and fixed me with a direct look. "Also, I need a designer for a new project, and you're the best in town." I blinked, processing this unexpected appearance. Brooke and I had a cordial professional relationship but weren't close friends. Yet here she was, arriving precisely when I needed both distraction and work. "Come in," I said, stepping back. "I'll make coffee." Over the next 2 hours, Brooke outlined her plan to expand her boutique into the vacant space next door, creating a design studio where clients could visualize furniture and accessories in room settings. She needed someone to design the space itself and create the vignettes that would showcase her inventory. "The budget's decent," she explained, spreading concept sketches across my dining table. "And it would mean ongoing work. We'd change the displays seasonally, plus consultations, with clients who want to replicate elements in their own homes. It wasn't as lucrative as the Parker development, but it was steady work with creative freedom. Exactly what I needed professionally and mentally right now." "Why me?" I asked finally. "There are other designers who haven't just had their lives explode in public." Brooke looked up, her expression unexpectedly fierce. "Because I've been where you are, Suzanne. 5 years ago, my ex-husband cleared out our accounts and disappeared to Thailand with his yoga instructor, left me with a mountain of debt and a business on the brink of collapse." I stared at her, stunned. Brooke's boutique was one of the most successful in town. She drove a vintage Mercedes and lived in a renovated Victorian in the historic district. There was no hint of past financial devastation in her polished exterior. "I had no idea," I admitted. "That's the point. she said with a grim smile. I rebuilt. And I did it partly because people in this community took a chance on me when banks wouldn't. Now I'm paying it forward. She tapped the design sketches. This isn't charity. I need this work done, and you're the right person for it. The fact that it helps you through a rough patch is just karma doing its thing. For the second time since Edgar left, I found myself humbled by unexpected support from someone I hadn't counted as close. First Vince with his offer to take my case on contingency, and now Brooke with this perfectly timed project. Thank you, I said simply. I'd love to work on this. Good, she replied briskly, gathering the sketches. Because I've already told my investors you're on board. We start planning next week. After Brooke left, I sat at the dining table surrounded by the preliminary materials she'd provided, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Professional excitement, creative challenge, purpose beyond survival. My phone chimed with a text message. Delia. Dad took me to Science Museum. Saw a butterfly exhibition. No girlfriend. Coming home at 5. Love you. The simple update released a tension I hadn't realized I was holding. She was okay. The visit was going well enough. No girlfriend had been introduced against my wishes. I texted back, "Love you too. Can't wait to hear." About the butterflies. As I returned to reviewing Brooke's materials, I reflected on the unexpected allies emerging in our crisis. Lou, calling Brooke on my behalf. Vince, offering professional support without upfront payment. Brooke herself, creating an opportunity born from her own experience with betrayal. Edgar had left us financially vulnerable, but he had underestimated the community around us. A network of support I hadn't fully appreciated until now. People who saw our value beyond our connection to him, who recognized our potential to rebuild. Even Delia, with her simple suggestion about contacting Brooke, had proven herself an unexpected ally in our recovery. While I had been fixated on what we'd lost, she had been quietly identifying resources we still had access to, connections we could leverage. When the front door opened at precisely 5 p.m., Delia burst in with uncharacteristic excitement, her cheeks flushed and her backpack bulging with museum souvenirs. "Mom, the butterflies had wings bigger than my hands, and I saw a real meteorite, and Dad bought me books about space." Edgar stood awkwardly in the doorway, not entering the house that had been his home for over a decade. "She had a good time," he said stiffly. "I was thinking we could make this a regular thing. Sundays." I studied him, noting the designer watch, the expensive haircut, the subtle signs of his new life funded by our old one. But I also saw the careful way he handled Delia's new books, the genuine pleasure he seemed to take in her excitement. Whatever. His failings as a husband, and they were substantial, he did seem to care for his daughter in his limited way. "We can discuss a regular schedule after the court date," I said, my voice neutral. "For now, let's take it week by week." He nodded curtly and bent to kiss Delia goodbye. "See you next Sunday, kiddo." After he left, Delia spread her museum treasures across the coffee table. Books, a small crystal prism, butterfly postcards, a packet of space ice cream. "Dad says he's sorry he took my college money," she announced, carefully arranging her postcards in rainbow order. "He says he'll pay it back someday." I bit my tongue, swallowing the skeptical response that rose automatically. "That would be nice," I said instead. "I told him he should just give it back now," she continued matter-of-factly. "Since he has a new job with more money, he said it's complicated." I stared at her, amazed by her directness. "You actually asked him about the money?" She nodded, still focused on her arrangement of postcards. "I said taking my college fund wasn't fair, and Mrs. Bennett says we should always speak up when things aren't fair." "What did he say to that?" I asked, genuinely curious about how Edgar had responded to this 8-year-old's moral clarity. He got very quiet. Then he said sometimes adults make mistakes. She looked up, her expression serious. I told him mistakes have consequences. That's what you always say when I do something wrong. In that moment, I saw Delia not just as my child to protect, but as an ally in her own right, armed with uncomplicated moral certainty and the disarming honesty that only children can wield without consequence. While I had been careful not to disparage Edgar, afraid of damaging their relationship, Delia had cut straight to the heart of his betrayal with simple questions I would never have dared to ask. "You're right," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Mistakes do have consequences, and I'm very proud of you for speaking up." As we sat together sorting through her museum treasures, I realized that our recovery wouldn't come from a single solution or savior. It would come from a constellation of unexpected allies, some offering professional opportunities, some legal guidance, some simple moral clarity. Each contribution a small light pushing back against the darkness Edgar had left behind. And the brightest of these lights was sitting right beside me, carefully explaining the phases of the moon using her new astronomy book, unaware that her simple courage had just shifted something fundamental in our journey forward. The week after Delia's first visit with Edgar brought a flurry of activity, as we began marshaling our resources, financial, legal, and emotional, for the battles ahead. Vince had warned me that Edgar's attorney would attempt to rush the proceedings, hoping to push through a settlement before we could fully understand the extent of Edgar's financial manipulations. "We need to slow this down," Vince explained during a strategy session at his office. "Edgar has been planning this for months, maybe years. We need time to catch up." He spread a timeline across his desk, pointing to key dates in our financial history. "See these transfers? They started small 3 years ago, then gradually increased. Classic dissipation of marital assets. He was testing to see if you'd notice." Stared at the paper, feeling sick. 3 years. While I had been planning family vacations and attending Delia's school events, Edgar had been systematically preparing to leave us financially devastated. "What can we do?" I asked, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "First, we file for an emergency injunction to freeze any remaining assets," Vince said, making notes. "Then we demand full financial disclosure, including business records, personal accounts, and any property purchased in the last 5 years. Will that work? He's an accountant. He knows how to hide money." Vince smiled grimly. "That's why we're bringing in Kenneth Palmer." Kenneth Palmer was a forensic accountant known for his work on high-profile divorce cases. His services normally cost thousands, money I definitely didn't have. "I can't afford," I began, but Vince cut me off. "Kenneth owes me a favor. And he despises financial fraud, especially when it involves children's education funds. He's agreed to take a reduced rate and defer payment until we secure a settlement." Another unexpected ally joining our constellation of support. I was learning that Edgar's betrayal, for all its devastation, had revealed a community around us I hadn't fully appreciated before. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate for the lifeline he was offering. "Don't thank me yet," Vince warned. "This will get messy. Edgar won't surrender easily, and his attorney will fight every request for information. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Delia's direct questioning of her father, her simple moral clarity about the unfairness of his actions. If my 8-year-old could face Edgar's betrayal head-on, I could certainly do the same. "I'm prepared," I said with more confidence than I felt. "What's our next step?" While Vince and Kenneth began the legal and financial investigation, I focused on rebuilding our day-to-day stability. Brooks' design project provided immediate work, but I needed more clients to replace the lost Parker development contract. With Lou's help, I created a new marketing strategy for Harmony Interiors, emphasizing small residential projects with quick turnaround times. "People always want their homes refreshed for the holidays," Lou pointed out as we worked on the new website copy. "Offer some quick-win packages, powder room makeovers, dining room refreshes, guest bedroom updates." The strategy worked better than I expected. Within 2 weeks, I had booked 5 small projects, not as lucrative as commercial work, but enough to keep us afloat while the legal process unfolded. Delia, meanwhile, had developed her own resource-gathering strategy. It began, innocently enough, with a school assignment about community helpers. "Mrs. Bennett says we should interview people with important jobs," she explained one evening as she worked on her project at the kitchen table. "I'm going to interview Mr. Torres because he's a lawyer who helps people when bad things happen." I glanced up from my design sketches, amused by her characterization of Vince. "That's a good choice. Who else are you thinking of?" "Grandpa, because he knows about money. And maybe Ms. Sullivan because she rebuilt her business after her husband." "Was mean too." I set down my pencil, studying my daughter's serious expression. "Delia, are you focusing your project on people who are helping us?" She nodded matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Bennett said we should choose community helpers we know personally, and these are the helpers fixing our problems." Her straightforward assessment left me momentarily speechless. While I had been carefully referring to our situation in vague terms like changes and challenges, Delia had been methodically categorizing the support network forming around us, identifying each person's specific contribution to our recovery. The interviews themselves proved surprisingly illuminating. Sitting at our kitchen table with her notebook and her father's old digital recorder, which she'd found in a drawer and appropriated for her project, Delia asked questions that cut to the heart of our situation. "Mr. Torres, what does dissipation of marital assets mean?" she asked Vince during their interview, carefully pronouncing the legal term she'd obviously overheard. Vince glanced at me, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I nodded slightly, giving permission for honest answers. Delia deserved truth, not patronizing evasions. "It means when someone takes money or property that belongs to both people in a marriage and uses it only for themselves," Vince explained carefully, "especially when they're planning to end the marriage." "Like when Dad took my college fund?" "Yes, exactly like that," Vince confirmed. "And can you get it back?" "Sometimes," Vince said, his voice gentle but honest. "We're certainly going to try." Her interview with my father focused on practical financial planning. "Grandpa, how do people save money when they don't have very much?" My father, who had grown up poor before building a successful small business, spoke to her about prioritizing needs over wants, finding creative ways to reduce expenses, and the importance of even small, consistent savings. When I was a boy, he told her, my mother kept a jar in the kitchen. Every night she'd empty the coins from her purse into that jar. It wasn't much, nickels and dimes mostly, but by Christmas there was always enough for presents. "Maybe Mom and I should have a jar," Delia mused, making a note in her book. That evening, she emptied her piggy bank onto her bed, methodically, counting out the coins and small bills she'd saved from birthdays and allowance. $87.32, she announced proudly. "We can put it in our emergency fund." I sat beside her on the bed, my throat tight with emotion. "Sweetie, that's your money. You don't need to use it for bills." "But Grandpa said everyone in a family helps when there's not enough," she insisted. "And I don't need it right now. I'm not going to college until I'm 18. Her simple logic, her generosity, her determination to contribute, it was almost too much to bear. I pulled her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "How about this?" I suggested. "We'll put your money in a special account just for you. Not for daily expenses, but for rebuilding your college fund. You can add to it whenever you want, and I'll match whatever you save." "You'll double it?" she asked, eyes widening at the mathematical implication. "Exactly. So your $87 becomes $174. She considered this proposal seriously. "That's a good investment strategy," she declared, using another term she'd obviously picked up from adult conversations. "But you have to promise to really save it, not just say you will." "I promise," I said solemnly. We'll open the account tomorrow. The next day at the credit union, Delia proudly presented her savings to the teller, explaining that this was the beginning of her new college fund. My dad took the first one, she added matter-of-factly, but Mom and I are building a better one. The teller, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. That's very responsible of you, she said, processing the deposit. Would you like to set up automatic transfers from your mom's account to yours? That can help the fund grow more consistently. By the end of the appointment, we had established not just Delia's new education savings account, but also a structured plan for my contributions and a monthly review process where Delia and I would track the account's growth together. This is our first family business meeting, Delia announced as we left the credit union, clutching her new account booklet proudly. Family business meeting, I repeated, struck by the term. I like that. That evening, as I reviewed the day's developments, I realized that Delia's school project had accomplished something I hadn't been able to do on my own. It had transformed our scattered supporters into an organized resource network, each with defined roles in our recovery. Vince was our legal advocate, Kenneth our financial investigator, Brooke our professional ally, my parents our emotional and practical support, and Delia herself had emerged as our strategist, her clear-eyed assessment of our situation unhindered by adult pride or complicated emotions. Where I saw overwhelming problems, she saw specific challenges with corresponding resources. Where I felt shame at needing help, she saw the natural cooperation of community. Edgar had underestimated many things when he emptied our accounts and walked away, but perhaps his greatest miscalculation was dismissing the resourcefulness of the 8-year-old whose future he had attempted to steal. While he had been smugly certain of our helplessness, Delia had been quietly assembling the very tools we would need to rebuild what he had destroyed. She was gathering resources not just for our immediate survival, but for a future beyond Edgar's betrayal. A future she clearly believed in, even when my own faith faltered. 3 weeks after Edgar's departure, the initial shock had evolved into focused determination. Our kitchen wall now featured what Delia proudly called our command center, a large whiteboard divided into sections for legal matters, financial goals, work projects, and daily logistics. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional, giving visible structure to the chaos Edgar had left behind. Today's the big day, I reminded Delia as she ate breakfast, carefully cutting her waffle into equal sections. Vince and Kenneth are presenting their findings to the court. She nodded seriously. The emergency injunction to freeze Dad's assets, she said, pronouncing the legal term with careful precision. Mr. Torres said it's the first step in protecting what's left. I suppressed a smile at her matter-of-fact recitation of legal strategy. That's right. I'll be home late, though. Can you go to Aunt Lou's after school? Already arranged, Delia confirmed. We're making lasagna for dinner. I put it on the schedule yesterday. She pointed to the whiteboard where, sure enough, lasagna at Lou's was written in her careful handwriting. When had my 8-year-old become so organized? Had she always been this way, and I simply hadn't noticed? Or was this methodical approach her way of creating order amid upheaval? Either way, her systems were keeping us on track in ways my scattered emotional state couldn't manage. The courthouse was imposing, all marble columns and echoing hallways. I met Vince in the lobby where he briefed me on what to expect. Remember, this is just a preliminary hearing, he cautioned. The judge will decide whether to grant our request to freeze Edgar's assets pending full financial disclosure. Edgar, and his attorney will be there, but there won't be any testimony today. I nodded, smoothing my skirt nervously. And Kenneth's findings? Compelling, Vince said, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Edgar was thorough, but not as clever as he thought. Kenneth found a pattern of transfers to an LLC registered in Nevada. The timing correlates perfectly with the depletion of your joint accounts. My stomach tightened at the confirmation of Edgar's calculated betrayal. Not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a methodical dismantling of our financial security. Will it be enough? I asked. To get the injunction? Almost certainly. To recover everything? That's a longer battle. Vince squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. But today is about stopping the bleeding. One step at a time. Edgar and his attorney were already seated when we entered the courtroom. He wore an expensive suit I'd never seen before, his expression carefully blank as we took our places at the opposite table. I forced myself to meet his gaze once, refusing to show weakness, then focused on arranging my papers. The proceedings were surprisingly brief. Vince presented our motion, Kenneth submitted his preliminary findings, and Edgar's attorney offered a perfunctory objection about unfounded accusations and legitimate business transactions. The judge, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and little patience for theatrics, asked several pointed questions about the timeline of withdrawals and transfers. Mr. Miller, she addressed Edgar directly, these transfers occurred immediately prior to your separation from your wife, with no prior pattern of similar transactions in your marital history. Can you explain the sudden urgency of these business investments? Edgar's composed facade cracked slightly. Your Honor, these were opportunities that required immediate action. The timing was unfortunate. Unfortunate, the judge repeated, her tone making it clear she found the word inadequate. Mr. Miller, I find the pattern established by the GR. Forensic accountant troubling enough to warrant caution. I'm granting the temporary injunction freezing the disputed assets pending full financial disclosure. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a complete hearing. With a bang of her gavel, our first real victory was secured. Edgar couldn't transfer or spend any more of our marital assets until the court determined their rightful distribution. The bleeding, as Vince had put it, was stopped. Edgar stormed out without looking at me, his attorney hurrying to keep pace. I remained seated, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Relief, vindication, and a strange, hollow sadness that the man I'd shared 14 years with had become a hostile stranger in an expensive suit. This is just the beginning, Vince reminded me as we left the courthouse. Edgar won't give up easily. He'll find ways to drag this out, hoping you'll get tired or run out of resources to fight. He doesn't know who he's dealing with anymore, I said, thinking of the command center in our kitchen, of Delia's determined organizing, of the support network we'd assembled. I'm not the same person he left behind. That evening, as promised, Lou and Delia had dinner waiting when I arrived at Lou's apartment. The lasagna was slightly lopsided, but smelled delicious, and Delia's face shone with pride as she explained how she'd layered the ingredients herself. And I made garlic bread, she added, pulling a foil-wrapped loaf from the oven with Lou's oversized mitts comically engulfing her small arms. With extra butter, just how you like it. Over dinner, I explained the day's events in simple terms. The judge had told Edgar he couldn't move any more money until all the facts were clear. Delia listened intently, asking surprisingly insightful questions about what happened next and how long it would take. So we won the first battle, she summarized, but the war isn't over. That's an accurate way to put it, I admitted, exchanging a glance with Lou. Wars cost money, Delia continued thoughtfully. Grandpa explained that when we were talking about his history books. He said even the winning side sometimes goes bankrupt. Lou nearly choked on her wine. Out of the mouths of babes, she muttered. We're not going bankrupt, I assured Delia quickly. Vince is helping us for very little money up front, and I have work coming in from Brooks' project and the other design clients. Delia nodded, but her expression remained serious. We should still have a backup plan. Mrs. Bennett says that's what smart leaders do. Later that night, after we'd returned home and Delia was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at our command center whiteboard. Delia's concerns echoed in my mind. She was right. This legal battle would be expensive and protracted, even with Vince's generous arrangement. Edgar had the resources to outlast us, to drag proceedings until our support system was exhausted. We needed to be strategic, to choose our battles carefully, to focus on what mattered most. what did matter most. Recovering the college fund, certainly. Securing appropriate child support for Delia's needs. Protecting my business assets and future earning potential. But beyond those practical considerations, what I truly needed was freedom from Edgar's control, financial, legal, and emotional. As long as we were locked in this battle, he still had power over our lives, our decisions, our peace of mind. I pulled out a fresh piece of paper and began to write, not a to-do list or a budget plan, but a vision of what winning would actually look like. Not just recovering assets, but rebuilding a life where Edgar's betrayal was a closed chapter, not an ongoing narrative. A life where Delia could be a child again, not our family's strategic planner. A life where I reclaimed my identity beyond Edgar's ex-wife or single mom struggling after betrayal. By the time I finished writing, something had shifted inside me. For the first time since Edgar left, I felt truly in control of our direction. We would continue the legal fight, yes, but with clear boundaries around what victory meant. We would pursue what mattered most: security for Delia, protection of my business, and freedom from Edgar's ongoing influence, and be willing to compromise on the rest. The next morning, I shared my epiphany with Delia as we updated the command center with fresh information from yesterday's hearing. "I've been thinking about what you said about wars being expensive," I told her. "You were right, and it made me realize we need to decide what winning really means for us." "Like setting goals," she suggested, uncapping a dry erase marker. "Exactly." So I made a list of what matters most. I showed her my paper, explaining each point in terms she could understand. She studied it seriously, then added a final point in her careful printing. Being happy again. "That's the most important one," I agreed, blinking back unexpected tears. "Everything else is just a path to that goal." She nodded, satisfied with this clarification of purpose, then pointed to the day's schedule. "We should add, call Mr. Torres to tell him our new plan." When I called Vince later that morning, he was surprisingly receptive to my refocused approach. "Most clients want to fight for everything, even when the cost, financial and emotional, outweighs the benefit," he said. "Your priorities make sense, Suzanne. We'll restructure our strategy accordingly. No more trying to trace every penny." "Edgar hid," I confirmed. "Let's focus on the college fund, securing appropriate child support, and protecting my business assets. I'm willing to let him keep the rest if it means ending this battle sooner." "He might see it as a victory," Vince warned. "Let him," I said, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "I'm redefining what winning means for us." That afternoon, I took another significant step in our action plan. I called a realtor about selling our house. The 4-bedroom colonial with its perfectly designed spaces and manicured lawn had once been my pride, but now it represented a financial burden and a constant reminder of Edgar's betrayal. "We need something smaller," I explained to Delia that evening as we walked through the rooms, making notes about repairs and updates needed before listing. "Something that's ours, not connected to Dad." To my surprise, she didn't protest. "Can I help design my new room?" "Of course," I promised. "It will be your special project." As we continued our tour, Delia pointed out Edgar's lingering presence in ways I hadn't noticed, the specific shade of blue in the living room that he had insisted on, the expensive kitchen appliances he had selected, the office setup that had been arranged to his specifications. "We can make a new house that's just for us," she declared, adding research apartments to our command center under her own initiative. Each action we took, freezing Edgar's assets, refocusing our legal strategy, planning to sell the house, was a step toward reclaiming control of our narrative. We were no longer simply responding to Edgar's betrayal. We were actively shaping our future without him. The transformation wasn't just in our circumstances, but in ourselves. I found myself making decisions with a confidence I hadn't felt in years, no longer second-guessing choices or deferring to an absent partner's hypothetical preferences. And Delia, my organized, insightful, resilient daughter, was finding her own voice in our new reality, contributing not just with cute suggestions, but with genuinely valuable perspectives that often cut through adult complications to the heart of what mattered. We were taking action not just against Edgar's betrayal, but toward the final item on our list of priorities, being happy again. Not eventually, not after all the legal battles were resolved, but now, in the midst of rebuilding, one deliberate choice at a time. Just as our momentum was building, the court injunction in place, our legal strategy focused, the house preparations for selling underway, the unexpected obstacles began to appear, testing our newfound resolve and resourcefulness. The first setback came in the form of an email from Edgar's attorney, proposing a settlement that bore all the hallmarks of his client's manipulative approach. He offered to return a fraction of Delia's college fund, $10,000 of the nearly $45,000 he had taken, in exchange for dropping all other financial claims and agreeing to a streamlined custody arrangement that would give Edgar alternate weekends and half of all school holidays. "It's laughable," Vince said when I forwarded him the email. "He steals $45,000, offers to return less than a quarter of it, and expects us to be grateful. Classic Edgar." I agreed, and yet a small, traitorous part of me whispered that $10,000 was better than nothing, that accepting might end this battle sooner, might return us to some version of normal life more quickly. "We're declining, right?" I asked Vince, needing the reassurance. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "This offer tells us something important. Edgar is feeling pressure. The court injunction is working. Kenneth's investigation is making him nervous. This is an attempt to cut his losses before we uncover the full extent of his financial maneuvers." When I explained the situation to Delia in simpler terms, Dad had offered to give back some of her college money if we agreed to stop looking for the rest. Her response was immediate and clear. "That's not fair," she declared, her small face serious. "He took all of it. He should give back all of it." Her moral clarity steadied me. Of course we wouldn't accept. Edgar's manipulations had worked on me for years because I had prioritized peace over principle, had accepted his financial control to avoid conflict. But through Delia's eyes, the situation was black and white. Wrong remained wrong, regardless of partial restitution. The second obstacle emerged from an unexpected source. Edgar himself, suddenly taking a renewed interest in parenting Delia. After 2 Sunday visits that had gone reasonably well, he began pushing for more time, texts arriving daily with suggestions for after-school activities, weekend outings, even a proposed overnight trip to a nearby amusement park. "He never wanted to take her to the amusement park before," I commented to Lou over coffee. "In fact, he used to complain about the crowds and the cost whenever I suggested it." Lou's expression was skeptical. "Funny how he's suddenly father of the year when there's a custody arrangement being negotiated." I sighed, stirring my coffee absently. "Vince says it's a standard tactic, establishing a pattern of involvement before the custody hearing. The more time he has with her now, the stronger his case for equal parenting time later, which reduces his child support obligation," Lou concluded, always quick to spot the financial angle. "So this sudden paternal dedication is about money, not Delia." "Probably," I agreed. "But how do I explain that to an 8-year-old who's excited about going to the amusement park with her dad?" The question wasn't rhetorical. I genuinely didn't know how to navigate this particular minefield. Denying Delia time with Edgar might protect her from his manipulations, but could also make me seem vindictive. Allowing the expanded visits might expose her to emotional manipulation, but would give her the agency to form her own relationship with her father. Unsurprisingly, it was Delia herself who provided a solution. "I want to go to the amusement park," she said, when I cautiously broached the subject of Edgar's increased interest. "But only if you come too." I blinked, surprised by the suggestion. You want me to come with you and Dad? She nodded firmly. Ms. Peterson at school says when her parents got divorced, they did something called parallel parenting, where they didn't have to talk to each other, but they were both there for important things. Once again, I marveled at her ability to absorb and apply adult concepts to our situation. And you think the amusement park is an important thing? It's our first big trip since Dad left, she explained, her logic impeccable. And I don't want to choose between you, so you should both come, even if you stay on opposite sides of the park. I texted Edgar with Delia's proposal, expecting immediate rejection. To my surprise, he agreed, reluctantly, with several unnecessary reminders about maintaining appropriate boundaries and putting Delia's needs first. But he agreed nonetheless. The day itself was a study in awkward choreography as Edgar, Delia, and I navigated the crowds of the amusement park while maintaining careful distance from each other. We split the cost of admission and food, took turns accompanying Delia on rides based on a schedule she had meticulously prepared the night before, and exchanged minimal words when our paths crossed at designated meeting points. Edgar clearly chafed under the arrangement, his smile tight when Delia insisted on showing me the stuffed penguin he had won for her, his posture stiff when she wanted a photo with both of us flanking her, careful inches maintained between the adults. But he endured it, understanding that resistance would only damage his carefully constructed image of dedicated fatherhood. For my part, I found unexpected strength in the strained day. 6 weeks earlier, the thought of spending hours in Edgar's proximity would have reduced me to anxiety and self-doubt. Now, I moved through the interactions with composure, no longer defined by his approval or disapproval. At the end of the day, as Delia skipped ahead to the parking lot, Edgar fell into, "Step beside me." "This isn't sustainable," he said quietly. "These joint outings, they're confusing for her." "Actually, it was her idea," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "She wanted both her parents present for her first big excursion since you left." He frowned, clearly disliking this narrative that placed Delia's agency at the center rather than his paternal generosity. "Well, it can't become a regular thing. I'm entitled to private time with my daughter." "Of course," I agreed mildly. "For her regular Sunday visits. But for special occasions, birthdays, holidays, milestone events, she's expressed a preference for both parents to be present. I'm simply supporting her wishes." His jaw tightened, but with Delia just ahead, he couldn't risk showing anger. "We'll discuss this later," he muttered. "Through our attorneys," I reminded him pleasantly. As agreed. The third and most challenging obstacle came from an entirely unexpected direction: Delia's school. 2 months after Edgar's departure, her teacher requested a conference to discuss concerning changes in her classroom behavior. "Delia has always been one of my most focused students," Mrs. Bennett explained as we sat in her classroom after hours. "But lately she's been distracted, checking her phone during lessons, asking to leave class to make calls." My stomach tightened, with worry. I had no idea. She seems fine at home, organized, engaged, handling everything so maturely. "That's part of what concerns me," Mrs. Bennett said gently. "Delia is displaying what we call precocious coping, taking on adult responsibilities and concerns beyond her developmental stage. While her maturity is impressive, it comes at a cost to her emotional well-being and academic focus." "She's been helping me manage our new situation," I admitted, "but I didn't realize it was affecting her schoolwork." Mrs. Bennett handed me a folder containing Delia's recent assignments. The quality of her work remained high, but I could see what the teacher meant about distraction. Math problems with calculations in the margins that had nothing to do with the assignment, but looked suspiciously like budget figures. Writing assignments that veered from the topic into complex family scenarios. Last week she received a text during silent reading time, Mrs. Bennett continued. When I reminded her about our no phones policy, she told me she needed to keep it on because and I quote, "Mom needs me to track the legal proceedings since Dad's attorney might try something sneaky." I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of what we had unknowingly placed on Delia's small shoulders suddenly crushing. In focusing on practical survival, finances, legal strategies, housing plans, I had missed the emotional toll on my daughter. While I'd been marveling at her resilience and organization, she had been silently absorbing adult stresses no 8-year-old should carry. "I've failed her," I whispered. "No," Mrs. Bennet said firmly. "You're both navigating an incredibly difficult situation. But Delia needs permission to be a child again, to focus on friendship bracelets and chapter books, not legal proceedings and family finances." She was right, of course. In our efforts to rebuild after Edgar's betrayal, Delia and I had formed a partnership that had sustained us through the crisis, but was now threatening her childhood development. Our command center, our family business meetings, our shared problem-solving, all had given us much-needed structure but had blurred the crucial boundary between parent and child. "What do you suggest?" I asked, grateful for this experienced perspective. "First, clear boundaries around adult concerns versus child concerns," Mrs. Bennet advised. "Second, a regular emotional check-in where Delia can express feelings without being the problem solver. And third, some professional support. Our school counselor is excellent with children navigating family transitions." I left the conference with a mix of guilt and determination. Edgar's betrayal had stolen more than money. It had temporarily stolen Delia's childhood, replacing carefree days with adult worries about finances and legal strategies. While I couldn't control his actions, I could control how we responded going forward, ensuring that our path to recovery didn't come at the expense of Delia's emotional well-being. That evening, I made a difficult but necessary change to our command center, removing Delia's name from the action items and creating a new section titled Kid Stuff, where only fun activities and normal childhood responsibilities were listed. When Delia noticed the change the next morning, her face reflected confusion. "Where are my jobs? I'm supposed to call Grandpa about the savings account today." "I'm taking that back," I explained carefully. "I appreciate all your help, but Mrs. Bennet helped me realize that some things should stay in the grown-up zone. Your job is to be 8, to do well in school, have fun with friends, and just be a kid." Her brow furrowed in concern. "But who will help you? You can't do everything alone." "I'm not alone," I assured her. "I have Vince and Kenneth for legal help, Grandma and Grandpa and Lou for emotional support, Brooke for work opportunities. My support team is strong, which means you can go back to being the kid, not the co-adult." She considered this seriously, her expression a mix of relief and reluctance. "Can I still know what's happening? I don't like being surprised by grown-up decisions." "Absolutely," I promised. "We'll have weekly updates where I tell you the important things in kid-appropriate ways. But the daily checking and worrying, that's my job, not yours." As we adjusted to this recalibrated relationship, me fully embracing the parental role I had partially abdicated in crisis, Delia cautiously reclaiming the childhood space she had voluntarily surrendered, I realized that the most unexpected obstacle hadn't been Edgar's manipulations or financial setbacks, but our own coping mechanisms that had temporarily protected us, but couldn't sustain us for the journey ahead. Recovery wouldn't just be about legal victories or financial rebuilding. It would be about restoring proper roles and boundaries, allowing Delia to be a child again while I shouldered the full weight of adult concerns. It was a correction that required strength rather than partnership, protection rather than collaboration, and it was perhaps the most important action we had taken yet on our path forward. 3 months after Edgar's departure, Kenneth Palmer's forensic investigation finally yielded results significant enough to change the trajectory of our case. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Vince called with news that sent me rushing to his office, heart pounding with a mixture of vindication and disbelief. "We found it," Vince announced as soon as I entered his office, gesturing to the stacks of financial documents spread across his conference table. "Not just some of it, all of it. Every penny Edgar took from your joint accounts, Delia's college fund, your retirement savings." Kenneth traced it through 3 shell companies and a Nevada LLC, but the money trail leads directly to a vacation property purchased 2 months before Edgar left. I stared at the documents, trying to process what this meant. He bought real estate with our money? "A beachfront condo in Florida," Vince confirmed, sliding a property listing across the table. "Purchased for $680,000, with a down payment that matches, to the dollar, the combined total of your joint savings and Delia's college fund." The listing showed a luxury oceanfront property with floor-to-ceiling windows, private beach access, and a marina slip for the yacht Edgar had presumably planned to buy next. The final photo showed a smiling real estate agent handing keys to a couple, Edgar and Connie, his arm around her waist, her left hand prominently displaying the engagement ring he had purchased with our money. "They documented it," I said incredulously. "They actually posed for photos with the evidence of his fraud." "Narcissists often do," Kenneth remarked, entering the office with another stack of papers. "They don't believe the rules apply to them. Makes my job easier when they're so blatant." Vince was practically vibrating with controlled excitement. "This changes everything, Suzanne. The property is a direct conversion of marital assets, which means we can petition for an immediate lien. Edgar can't sell it, can't refinance it, can't use it as collateral. And given the clear paper trail showing he used specific funds earmarked for Delia's education, we have grounds to demand full restoration of the college fund, plus damages." "What happens now?" I asked, still processing the implications. "Now," Vince said with grim satisfaction, "we confront Edgar directly, not just through legal filings but face to face. I want to see his expression when he realizes his perfect plan has unraveled." The confrontation was scheduled for Thursday, a formal settlement conference in Vince's office with both attorneys present. Edgar had initially refused, claiming scheduling conflicts, but had ultimately agreed when Vince hinted at the significant new evidence we planned to present to the court if the meeting didn't occur. As the day approached, I found myself unexpectedly calm. The rage that had initially consumed me after Edgar's betrayal had evolved into something colder and more focused. Not a desire for revenge, but for justice and restitution. I wanted Edgar to understand that his actions had consequences, that I was no longer the accommodating, conflict-avoidant woman he had manipulated for years. "Remember," Vince coached me the morning of the meeting, "let Edgar make the first offer. It will reveal how much he knows about what we've found. Stay calm. No matter what he says, your composure is your power." Edgar arrived exactly on time, his attorney Marshall Beck in tow. He wore another expensive suit, his expression carefully arranged into professional neutrality, though I caught the flicker of surprise when he saw me sitting confidently at Vince's conference table rather than shrinking in a corner as he had perhaps expected. "Suzanne," he nodded curtly. "Edgar," I replied, my voice steady. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Marshall Beck took immediate control, laying out what he called a generous final offer, essentially the same terms they had proposed previously, with a slight increase in the college fund restitution. "My client is prepared to return $15,000 to the education fund, with the stipulation that he maintains equal decision-making authority regarding its eventual use," Beck stated. Vince smiled thinly. "That's an interesting starting point, given the circumstances." Edgar shifted slightly in his seat. "I think it's more than fair. The original fund wasn't entirely from marital assets. My parents contributed significant portions. It was a lie, of course. Edgar's parents had given Delia birthday checks of $100 each year, hardly the significant portions he claimed. But before I could react, Vince placed a calming hand on my arm. "Before we respond to your offer," Vince said pleasantly, "I'd like to address some new information that's come to light. He slid a folder across the table. Our forensic accountant has completed his investigation. We've identified the destination of all funds removed from the joint accounts, Delia's college fund, and Mrs. Miller's retirement account. Edgar's expression remained neutral, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. I've already provided full financial disclosure as required by the court. Not quite full, Kenneth interjected, opening his laptop to display a presentation. You failed to disclose the Serenity Shores LLC, registered in Nevada 3 months before your separation, or its sole asset, a beachfront property in Naples, Florida, purchased for $680,000 with a down payment of $165,243. The amount was exact, the combined total of our liquidated accounts. Edgar's facade cracked slightly, a muscle jumping in. His jaw. That's a separate business investment, he began. But Kenneth was already advancing to the next slide, the property listing with Edgar and Connie beaming in front of their new condo. A business investment you plan to live in with your fiancé, Kenneth observed dryly. Interesting business model. Marshall Beck leaned over to whisper urgently in Edgar's ear, but Edgar brushed him off, his composure crumbling. You had no right to investigate my personal businesses, he snapped, color rising in his face. That property has nothing to do with our marital assets. The financial records indicate otherwise, Vince replied calmly. The down payment came directly from accounts you emptied immediately prior to leaving your family. That creates a clear trail of dissipation of marital assets, which the court typically views very unfavorably. Edgar's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting? We're not suggesting anything, I said, speaking for the first time since the evidence was presented. We're stating facts. You took our money, Delia's college fund, our savings, and bought a beach condo for you and your girlfriend. And you did it in a way you thought no one would trace. Edgar's gaze swung to me, surprise evident in his expression. He wasn't accustomed to this version of me, direct, unflinching, calling out his manipulations without emotional drama. What do you want? He asked finally. Vince laid out our terms, full restoration of Delia's college fund with interest, return of my portion of the retirement accounts, establishment of appropriate child support based on Edgar's actual income rather than the reduced amount he had reported, and a lien on the Florida property until all financial obligations were satisfied. That's absurd, Edgar scoffed. I don't have liquid assets to meet these demands. Then sell the condo, I suggested simply. That's not an option, he retorted. Connie and I are planning to… Your plans with Connie are not our concern, Vincey interrupted smoothly. Your legal and financial obligations to your child and soon-to-be ex-wife, however, are very much our concern. And the courts. Marshall Beck, clearly recognizing the strength of our position, attempted to regain control of the discussion. Let's take a step back. Perhaps we can discuss a structured settlement, payments over time rather than immediate, lump sums. That would be acceptable, Vince acknowledged, provided adequate security is established, such as the lien on the Florida property. Edgar's face flushed with anger. You're trying to sabotage my new life. This is pure vindictiveness. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before I responded, my voice quiet but firm. No, Edgar. This is accountability. You chose to leave. That was your right. But taking money set aside for Delia's future, money we built together for our family's security, that wasn't your right. Those weren't just numbers in an account. They represented years of work, sacrifice, and planning for our daughter's future. I'm still planning for her future, he insisted. I've always provided for Delia. Except when you emptied her college fund to buy a beach condo with your girlfriend, I pointed out. That wasn't providing, that was stealing. Edgar flinched at the word stealing, his attorney again attempting to intervene. But I continued, maintaining the calm determination I had practiced. I'm not interested in punishing you, Edgar. I'm interested in restoring what rightfully belongs to Delia and establishing a fair path forward. How you manage your relationship with her, how you rebuild her trust, that's between you and her. But the financial obligations aren't negotiable. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, we had the framework of an agreement. Edgar would restore the college fund in full within 6 months, with payments secured by the lien on the Florida property. Child support would be calculated based on his actual income, and my portion of the retirement accounts would be restored through a structured 5-year payment plan. It wasn't an immediate victory. We wouldn't see the full restoration for some time, but it was a binding acknowledgement of Edgar's obligations and our rights. More importantly, it was the moment Edgar realized he could no longer manipulate or intimidate me into accepting less than what was fair. As the attorneys finalized the written terms, Edgar and I found ourselves momentarily alone in the hallway. He studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between resentment and reluctant respect. "You've changed," he observed finally. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I've reclaimed parts of myself that got lost during our marriage. The woman who knows her worth, the mother who will fight for her child's future, the professional who trusts her own judgment." "I never meant for things to end this way," he said, a hint of the old Edgar visible briefly beneath the defensive exterior. "I believe you," I replied, surprising myself with the realization that I did. Edgar hadn't planned to hurt us. He had simply failed to consider us at all when pursuing his own desires. It wasn't malice but profound selfishness that had driven his actions. Understanding this didn't excuse what he had done, but it helped me see our past with clearer eyes. The marriage I had believed in, the partnership I had invested in, they had existed only in my perception, not in reality. That knowledge, painful as it was, freed me from lingering doubts about what I might have done differently, what signals I might have missed. As we returned to the conference room to sign the preliminary agreement, I felt a profound shift within myself. This confrontation wasn't just about financial restitution, it was about standing firmly in my own truth, refusing to be gaslit or manipulated, and demonstrating to both Edgar and myself that I was capable of protecting what mattered most. The woman who had once deferred to Edgar's financial decisions, who had accepted his explanations without question, who had prioritized peace over principle, she was gone, transformed by necessity and struggle into someone stronger, clearer, and unwilling to settle for less than justice. News of our settlement. Agreement spread quickly through our small community. I hadn't intended to make the details public, but Edgar's capitulation and the formal acknowledgement of his financial misconduct became common knowledge after he was overheard arguing with Connie at a local restaurant about having to sell her dream beach house. The community response was immediate and unexpected, a wave of support that manifested in practical, tangible ways. Former clients called to restart projects they had placed on hold. New design opportunities appeared through referrals from people I barely knew. The realtor listing our house brought serious buyers within days, all offering fair prices despite knowing it was a divorce sale. Most surprising was the response from Edgar's professional circle. 3 of his clients, small business owners who had worked with him for years, contacted me to offer their services. A contractor who volunteered to handle repairs on the house before the sale, a landscaper who refreshed our curb appeal at no charge, and a financial advisor who offered free consultation on how to structure Delia's restored college fund for maximum growth. Edgar wasn't just your husband, the financial advisor explained when I asked why she was helping us. He was a member of this business community, and his actions reflect on all of us. Some of us want to demonstrate that ethics still matter. The mothers from Delia's school organized a different kind of support. Lou arrived one Saturday morning with 4 other women, all carrying cleaning supplies and moving boxes. "We're your packing party," she announced. "The house sale is moving fast, and you need to be ready." As we sorted through 8 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep for our new smaller home and what to donate, these women created a buffer of normalcy and even humor around the dismantling of my former life. Good riddance to this ugly lamp, one mother declared, holding up an expensive but hideous art piece Edgar had insisted on displaying. Tell me this wasn't your design choice, Suzanne. Edgar believed it showed his sophisticated taste, I admitted, laughing for the first time at a memory that had once been a source of tension. Even Delia received her own form of community support. Mrs. Bennett had quietly informed the school counselor about our situation, and a weekly Changing Families group had been formed for children navigating divorce, remarriage, or other family transitions. Delia returned from her first session animated and relieved. I'm not the only one whose dad did something bad, she reported. Jason's dad went to jail for stealing money from his job, and Mia's mom moved to California with a new boyfriend. We're all dealing with big changes, but Ms. Liu says that makes us extra strong, not broken. That simple reframing, extra strong, not broken, resonated deeply. The community surrounding us wasn't offering pity but affirmation, not charity but solidarity. They were acknowledging both our wounds and our resilience, treating us not as victims to be rescued, but as valued members worth supporting through a difficult transition. As we prepared to move forward into our new home and reconfigured life, this network of support, some expected, much of it surprising, formed a foundation more secure than anything Edgar had ever provided. 6 months after Edgar's departure, Delia and I stood in the empty living room of our new home, a charming 3-bedroom townhouse with large windows and a small garden. Half the size of our previous house, it nonetheless felt more spacious, unburdened by the weight of Edgar's presence or the memories of his betrayal. It's blank, Delia observed, her voice echoing slightly in the unfurnished space. Like a new sketchbook. That's exactly right, I agreed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. A fresh start. We get to decide what goes on these pages. The sale of our former home had provided enough to purchase this smaller property outright and establish an emergency fund, a buffer of security I had never experienced during my marriage to Edgar, when financial decisions were always his domain and information dispensed on a need-to-know basis. True to the settlement agreement, the first installment restoring Delia's college fund had arrived, transferred directly from the proceeds of Edgar's reluctant sale of the Florida condo. Connie, I'd heard through the community grapevine, had not taken this development well, their relationship strained by the loss of their beach retreat, and the realization that Edgar's financial situation wasn't what he had led her to believe. Found I no longer cared about their relationship dramas. Edgar's life, once the center of my orbit, had receded to the periphery of my concerns, relevant only in his role as Delia's father and his financial obligations to our family. My design, business had found solid footing in the wake of the scandal. Brooks' boutique expansion project had led to 3 new commercial clients, each impressed by the creative solutions I'd developed on a limited budget. Residential clients, many referred by the mothers from Delia's school, filled my schedule, with smaller projects that allowed flexible hours and working from home. Most importantly, Delia was thriving again. With the Changing Families group's support and the clear boundaries we'd established between adult and child concerns, she had gradually returned to age-appropriate interests and activities. Her room in our new home, designed entirely according to her specifications, with a reading nook and art station, had become her sanctuary, filled with projects and books rather than worry and responsibility. Can we paint the living room yellow? She asked, spinning slowly in the empty space. Not bright yellow, but the kind that feels like sunshine even when it's raining? Absolutely, I agreed. This is our canvas now. As moving trucks arrived, with the carefully curated belongings we had chosen to bring into our new life, furniture I had designed, art we both loved, books and games and kitchen tools that served our daily needs, I felt a profound sense of rightness settling around us. Edgar had stolen our security, depleted our finances, and disrupted our family structure. But in forcing us to rebuild, he had inadvertently given us something valuable: the opportunity to create a life designed by our own values rather than inherited circumstances or compromised choices. Our new home wasn't just smaller and more manageable, it was more authentically ours. Every element reflected intentional decisions rather than accumulated habits or someone else's preferences. The blank walls, waiting for color and art, represented not emptiness, but possibility. A future limited only by our imagination and determination, not by Edgar's betrayal. 1 year after Edgar's abrupt departure, the transformations in our lives, both external and internal, had become undeniable. The changes weren't just in our living situation or financial arrangements, but in who we had become through the crucible of betrayal and recovery. The most visible transformation was in our home. What had started as an empty townhouse was now a vibrant reflection of our personalities and values. The yellow living room walls did indeed bring sunshine on rainy days. Delia's art filled the hallways, her talent flourishing in the emotional safety we'd rebuilt. My design studio occupied the smallest bedroom, where commercial and residential projects overlapped in creative chaos that somehow made perfect sense to me. But the deeper changes were in ourselves. I noticed it first in Delia, watching her at her birthday party, now 9, hosting friends in our backyard garden. She moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before, a self-assurance born not from easy success, but from weathering significant hardship. "Your daughter has remarkable resilience," Mrs. Bennet commented, watching Delia direct an elaborate game she had invented. "Some children would be diminished by what she's experienced. She seems to have expanded instead." "Expanded," I repeated, recognizing the truth in the word. Delia hadn't just survived her father's betrayal. She had grown beyond its boundaries. Her sense of justice, her problem-solving abilities, her emotional intelligence had all deepened, not despite the challenges, but because of how she had met them. The same expansion had occurred within me, though I recognized it more slowly. It emerged in unexpected moments, negotiating confidently with contractors, making financial decisions without second-guessing myself, setting boundaries with Edgar during co-parenting discussions. One revealing incident came during a Sunday handoff, when Edgar arrived to pick up Delia for their regular visit. He casually mentioned that Connie would be joining them for dinner. "That's not part of our agreement," I reminded him calmly. "New partners are introduced only after discussion and preparation." The old Edgar would have bulldozed past my objection, using charm or intimidation to get his way, but something in my posture, my tone, my unwavering gaze made him reconsider. "You're right," he acknowledged reluctantly. "We'll reschedule that part." Later, reflecting on the brief exchange, I realized what had changed. It wasn't just that I had asserted a boundary. I had done so without anxiety, without the fear of conflict that had characterized our marriage. I had spoken from a place of clarity and calm authority, and Edgar had responded to that authority, rather than attempting to undermine it. The transformation was most profound in how I viewed myself. The woman who had deferred to Edgar's financial expertise, who had accommodated his preferences at the expense of her own, who had interpreted his criticism as guidance, she was gone. In her place stood someone who trusted her own judgment, who recognized her own value, who understood that compromise required mutual respect, not unilateral surrender. "Sometimes," I told Lou over coffee, "I almost want to thank Edgar for leaving. Not for how he did it, certainly, but for forcing me to discover what I'm actually capable of." "You didn't need his betrayal to be amazing," Lou objected. "You always were." "Maybe," I conceded. "But I didn't know it until I had no choice but to find out." 18 months after Edgar's departure, we had established what Delia called our new normal. Routines and relationships that no longer felt like temporary adjustments, but like the natural rhythm of our lives. The final payment restoring Delia's college fund arrived on schedule, transferred without commentary from Edgar's account to the educational trust our financial advisor had established. I marked the occasion not with bitterness about what had been taken, but with quiet satisfaction at what had been reclaimed. We should celebrate, I told Delia that evening. The college fund is completely restored, plus interest. She looked up from her homework, considering this milestone seriously. Does that mean we won? It means that part of our journey is complete, I clarified. But I don't think about it as winning or losing anymore. It's more about restoration and moving forward. She nodded, absorbing this perspective. Can we celebrate by having Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Lou over for dinner? And Ms. Sullivan too? That sounds perfect, I agreed, touched by her instinct to include the people who had formed our support network through the crisis and recovery. Our celebration dinner became a testament to how much had changed. The dining table I had designed and built myself, a project that had once seemed impossibly ambitious, now hosted the makeshift family we had gathered around us. My parents, Lou, Brooke, and even Vince shared stories and laughter in our yellow-walled living room, their presence affirming the connections that had strengthened through adversity. Edgar's role in our lives had found its own equilibrium. His Sunday visits with Delia continued, now following a predictable pattern that provided structure without drama. He had finally introduced Connie, their relationship having survived the financial adjustments, though with notably less extravagance than their early days. Delia had approached the meeting with her characteristic directness. "You helped my dad take my college money," she had informed Connie during their first encounter. That wasn't nice. The blunt acknowledgement had apparently startled Connie into a genuine apology, and while they would never have a warm relationship, a workable civility had been established. My professional life had found balance as well. Harmony Interiors now operated from a small studio space Brooke had helped me secure adjacent to her expanded boutique. Our businesses had developed a symbiotic relationship, my design clients often purchasing from her collection, her customers frequently seeking my services. The arrangement provided stability without requiring the exhausting pursuit of large commercial projects that had once seemed the only path to success. Most importantly, Delia and I had established an authentic mother-daughter relationship, not the crisis partnership of our early days, nor the traditional maternal authority I had initially tried to reclaim, but something more balanced and genuine. I was clearly the parent, setting boundaries and making final decisions, but Delia's voice was heard and her insights valued in age-appropriate ways. "Mom," she said one evening as we walked through our neighborhood, the autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet, "remember when Dad first left and you said we would be okay?" "I do," I replied, recalling how those words had felt like a desperate promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "You were right," she said simply, slipping her hand into mine. "We really are." 2 years to the day after I discovered Edgar had emptied our accounts and left with Connie, I sat alone on the small deck of our townhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Delia was at a sleepover with friends, a normal 9-year-old doing normal 9-year-old things, her resilience having carried her to a place where her father's betrayal was a fact of her history, but no longer the defining feature of her life. The quiet of the evening, I reflected on the journey we had traveled, not just the external path from crisis to stability, but the internal transformation from devastation to strength. The anniversary had arrived without the emotional weight I might have expected. Instead of reopening wounds, the date merely marked distance traveled. The woman I had been 2 years ago, shocked, frightened, desperate to understand what had happened, and how to fix it, felt like a familiar stranger. I recognized her fears and her pain, but they no longer defined me. The path from there to here hadn't been linear or simple, but it had been profoundly transformative. My phone chimed with a text from Lou. "Remembering what day it is. You okay?" I smiled at her thoughtfulness and replied, "More than okay. Grateful, actually." Her response came quickly. "Grateful?" For Edgar being the worst, I considered how to explain the complex truth. Finally, I typed, "Grateful for discovering my own strength, for the community that appeared when I needed it, for the chance to build a life that's authentically mine." After sending the message, I gazed around at the evidence of that authentic life. The garden I had planted with Delia, the wind chimes my father had hung, the outdoor furniture I had designed myself. None of it was particularly grand or impressive by external standards. But everything represented a choice I had made, a skill I had developed, a piece of myself I had reclaimed or discovered anew. Edgar's betrayal had initially appeared as an ending, the death of the family and future I had believed in. But with time and perspective, I could now see it as a difficult beginning, the painful but necessary catalyst for growth that might never have occurred otherwise. The real wisdom wasn't in pretending the pain hadn't been real or the struggle hadn't been hard. It was in recognizing that difficulty and growth were not opposites but companions, that resilience wasn't the absence of wounds but the strength that grew from healing them. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, I thought about what I would tell Delia when she was older and asked about this chapter in our lives. I would tell her the truth, that trust broken can be devastating, that betrayal cuts deep, that some losses can't be undone. But I would also tell her what we had discovered together, that human beings are remarkably adaptable, that communities can form safety nets when families fracture, that children and adults alike can find strength they never knew they possessed. Most importantly, I would tell her what her 8-year-old self had taught me in our darkest moments, that problems can be solved, that burdens shared become lighter, and that even when someone you trusted completely lets you down, you can still build something beautiful from what remains. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.